Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. Today is June 28th, and it is the Daily Show. Today we have myself, James, joined by Griffin. How we doing?
Doing good, James. Outside the wrist, yeah, we're doing good.
For those that are unaware, Griffin is dealing with what'd you say? Is it completely fractured?
No, it's just like the radiologist was kind of like gonna look at it. I don't think it's like a complete fracture, but it's pretty much like a really, really bad sprain. So to the point where it's like pretty much dealing with a fractured wrist. So yeah, but
Quite
all
optimistic
good.
to be doing good despite having we're walking around in a brace, but
Yeah,
you're more optimistic than me.
yeah.
Um, so today, plan on keeping it a little bit shorter, around the half-hour mark. There isn't a ton of breaking news. Obviously, the NBA has been busy. We've had the Porzingis trade, the Chris Paul trade, the John Collins trade, but we've had some daily shows go through, and I know Bagdonis and Matt talked about that yesterday. So we don't have much to go in detail in terms of those trades. So instead, what we're going to do is kind of run through some free agency topics and kind of preview free agency, which today is the 28th. That starts on the 30th, I believe it is. NBA free agency starts. So that's coming right around the corner. So we're going to touch on some players, some topics as free agency rolls around. So I guess the very first thing that I kind of want to touch on is James Harden. And I think the reason James Harden is interesting this offseason is because since the Rockets have so much cap space, it's like that kind of determines where we go from free agency. If the Rockets are able to land Harden and, you know, package all their cap space together and spend it on him, then that kind of, limit some of the flexibility for some other guys. So I guess just to start off, let's start off with Harden. Do you think it's Philly or do you think it's Houston? Which direction do you think this goes in?
I mean, as of right now, I'm kind of clueless in terms of just where he's gonna go. I feel like we've had multiple sides of just like, oh, he's going to Houston now, he's going to Philly, like he's staying there, he's going in his player option and everything. But honestly, I feel like he's just gonna end up staying in Philly, and I think the rumors of just him going to the Rockets are kind of wrong. I don't think Ime and just the Houston franchise is really trying to turn back the clock with Harden, and I mean, I feel like it's just not going to be they're trying to build a new identity, and I feel like Harden shouldn't be a part of it, and he won't be a part of it. So, I think his best option for Harden is trying to stay in Philly. Like they already had a thing going in there. It may not have worked out, but I think running it back a little bit might be the better option here.
hmm Yeah, I'm with you. It feels like to me it's just the Houston to, or excuse me, the Harden to Houston kind of feels like a big smokescreen to me,
Mhm.
where it's like Houston has all this cap space. He played in Houston. Everyone knows him. He has a lot of connections in the city of Houston. So I feel like it's easy to kind of convince people or convince teams even, that he would entertain going back to Houston. So to me, that feels kind of like a smoke screen of hey, he can go back to Houston. Philly, you better pay him, you better give him a decent contract here. It's kind of what it feels like to me.
Mhm.
Um, and looking at like Houston's situation, I don't think it makes much sense to bring in a major ball handler, considering you just drafted Amon Thompson, who ideally you'd like to give him a lot of reps with the ball in his hands to develop, especially his rookie year. And then once that young core they have starts to grow together, then he's ready to go and he's playing at his highest potential. But it doesn't make sense to me to kind of bring in another ball handler to kind of mess up his progression, especially this early into his career.
Yeah, and especially I think like even if they bring in Harden too, that kind of kicks Kevin Porter Jr. aside. I feel like even with that, it kind of disrupts Jalen Green's potential as well, and just he's been kind of the ball handler in Houston for a little bit. I know Porter Jr. and him have kind of switched off, but bringing in Harden is kind of would be a mistake in my opinion of at Houston, just kind of disrupting their new identity and just overall just their development of all their young guys. So yeah.
hmm I'm with you. Do you think there are any teams that could swoop in here that maybe we're not talking about that could land Harden? just, you don't even have to throw a team out because personally I don't. So you may not even have an answer to that. But do you think there's a team out there? Because off the top of my head, I can't really, think of another team that would be interested in bringing him in.
Yeah, I mean, James, I can't think of like a team on top of my head, and based on just how old Harden is getting and his play is just almost just kind of decreasing like to at its highest or to its lowest point right now. And we saw in the playoffs he was not a good player. And I think if he continues to show that and show not really his kind of demeanor in basketball and just his mentality that he had in Houston before, who would want him? Like, who would want that contract? Who would wanna pay him, like, $50 million a year, maybe more, for a slumped Harden? I sure
Mhm.
wouldn't. I know the Celtics wouldn't. I know Philly doesn't want to, but they might be stuck with him, and, I mean, it just doesn't seem smart for any team to really sign him at this point.
Yep, I'm with you on that because I don't think he's going to be a guy that ages gracefully unless he drastically changes his game, which I'm not sure that he will. So I'm
Mhm,
with you on that. I wouldn't necessarily be in the James Harden market if I were a GM this summer.
mhm,
Another guy that I'm sure a lot of people would say the same thing about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie, a lot of his free agency, it kind of hasn't gotten talked about because it almost seems like a foregone conclusion that he's going to end up back in Dallas. There's been some Houston rumors as well for him. I'm not sure how legit those are. Once again, that seems like connecting a free agent to the team with the most cap space, so you can get more money somewhere else. Uh, Once again, this to me feels like Dallas is really the only option. You give
mhm.
up the draft capital for him, you'd look real silly if you let him walk. And they're also not negotiating sign-in trades, or they said they didn't want to work on sign-in trades for Kyrie. They wanted to keep him. So I think this is kind of similar to the Harden situation. I'm not necessarily sure that he goes anywhere else. And if he were, I'm sure there would be teams that were interested, like Los Angeles. I imagine they'd be interested in adding Kyrie, but I don't think they have the capability of doing so with their current cap situation. So, um, what are you thinking for Kyrie this summer? And do you think it's Dallas, or Do you think a team like the Lakers could swoop in here and mess this up for him?
Yeah, I mean, I know we heard the rumors of just him going back with LeBron and in Los Angeles, but I think the Lakers have a good thing going with them, and I know their whole goal is to kind of just bring back their core role players that they kind of had succeed in last season. And if I was Dallas, like I think if you give up all that capital and kind of are starting to build a young team around Luca and have a lot of good pieces from this draft, why not bring back Kyrie? And I think he'd be a good mentor for some of those young guys. And I mean, you gave up that capital, so I think letting him walk would be probably a very poor decision for that franchise. And I know they didn't really get to click too much with Luca and Kyrie as a duo, but I think if you give them the whole season and they can kind of work their things out, and I think they could be just a good duo together.
Yeah, and to that point, like I feel like it's a little bit early to give up on that duo. Like you said, they did not play many games together. They weren't necessarily good when they played together, but when you don't play that many games together, you're not going to reach your full potential there. So I'm with
Mhm.
you that they can probably be a little bit better. And also shout out to Dallas for the moves they made in the draft. I thought they had a really good draft. Basically got off Bertans, moved down 2 slots, ended up drafting the guy they were going to draft anyways in Derek Lively.
Yep.
Used the trade exception to then turn around and grab Rashawn Holmes, another quality center, and drafted Olivier Maxence Prosper. So I thought they ended up having a really good night of the draft, and that probably those are a couple two big men who they need big men and a really good perimeter defender in Prosper. So I thought they did good, and they'll probably have a little bit more success this year since it looks like they're going to be entering the year with a just simply more talented roster. So I'm with you on that, that they can kind of at least run it back. I'm not sure how many years you're going to have to give Kyrie, which is probably the biggest factor in negotiations. But I'm with you. I think they should run that back. So.
Yeah.
Um, and then while we're on, we kind of talked a little bit about Los Angeles. This is, obviously isn't one of the top free agents, but it is someone who is a big name in free agency, D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell last season did not go well with the Lakers. And the Lakers have free agents in Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura, who are restricted free agents. D'Angelo Russell unrestricted. What, what do you make of this? Do the Lakers bring back D'Angelo Russell, or do they let him walk after the playoffs that he had?
I mean, I still believe in D'Lo. I think I really do, and I know he kind of had a slump of playoff, and every player has that. Every player has a bad playoff, but I think if you just kick him out after trading for him is kind of disrespectful for D'Lo, and I think you got to run it back with this Lakers team no matter what. They did some damage in the playoffs, and I feel like if they can really just kind of have that whole team together for an entire season and playoffs, like they only had them what together for I think maybe 30 games, maybe, and they did really well. So I think bring back D'Lo on possibly a vet min. If you knew that, Trey chiming in here. Russell sucks more than my wrist. I don't know. Wrist isn't too bad, so I don't know if it's that low, Trey. But I mean, it's one bad playoff. I
Yeah.
think you gotta put some faith into him. I think signing him on, like, a vet min or just a very, really low c like, a really low contract, like, I'm talking 5 mil a year, then I think that's a steal for him, and I think that's very reasonable for D'Lo as a player because he can still score. I know he had a bad playoff, but let's put some faith in him.
Yeah, I'm a little bit lower on D'Angelo Russell than you are. But I don't think that he's a bad bench piece. The problem I have with the Lakers is that they don't really have an elite guard or a great guard room, and that kind of forces you to try and get more out of D'Angelo Russell than you'd like. Um, and D'Angelo Russell is such a score first guard that you know, it's not ideal when you're on a team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But I'd like to see D'Angelo Russell try and transform into a little bit more of an off-ball scorer,
Mhm,
um, someone who can help space the floor, which I think he has the capability of doing. I think there should be a pretty reasonable cap here for the Lakers. Lakers should try and bring him back, but if someone comes out here and offers him, a 4-year contract, 15 million a year, you go, all right, sorry, D'Angelo, we like you, but we don't like you that much. So
yeah.
just wanted to throw D'Lo's name out there while we were on the Lakers talk. And then one guy who I don't really know what Fred Van Vliet is going to do this summer. It's kind of in an interesting spot. It sounds like he's not going back to the Raptors, but you look at the teams with cap space, and I'm not really sure what Fred Van Fleet is going to do because the teams with cap space this summer are like the Rockets, the Pacers, the Spurs, the Pistons. It's a lot of teams that I don't really think it makes much sense to add Fred Van Fleet. So, do
Mhm.
you have any ideas for teams that may be in the Van Fleet market?
I mean, I feel like this is probably one of, if not the most interesting free agent because I know Van Vliet is not talked about as much as like really any other free agent. I know he's almost 30 years old, which seems much older than what he actually is. He
Hmm.
seems like such a young guy when I thought he was like around 25, 26. But he's almost 30, which kind of scares me. And I think if you give him that big of a deal, a pure scorer and a shorter guard, I think that might hurt you in the long run. And I know he's been good, but I really don't see a team that's really let me go out and give him 40, $50 million a season. And that's gonna be my franchise guy. Because I don't think Fred Van Vliet really screams, he's my number one option. He's gonna be that guy that I'm going to at the last shot, at the last possession, and it just doesn't make sense to me. So I think if a team's willing to make like a splash on like a 2, 3 year deal that's kind of looking to push them into a bigger contender, I can see it as a good deal. But other than that, I feel like a rebuilding team really cannot sign him.
Yeah, I think this is going to have to be a sign and trade.
Mhm.
Probably is what it's going to end up being because like you said, I don't think it makes much sense for a team like the Rockets or the Pacers or whichever team with cap space you want to name. There aren't many of them. I just don't think any of those teams make sense to bring in a 30-year-old point guard that it seems like he could help a contender. I'm not sure
Mhm,
why he would want that either. I'm not sure why he would want to go to that type of situation where I mean, even if you're going to like an Indiana, you have Tyrese Halliburton. If you're going to Detroit, you have Cade Cunningham. Houston has their ball handlers, unless you want to bring Amen Thompson off the bench. So it's like I don't even think any of these situations are like super point guard needy teams. Um, the one team that I think may make sense is the Clippers. If the Clippers, try and pull off a sign and trade, they could package like a Morris salary, or I think they were talking about trading Norman Powell. So it's like they're trying to get off salary there in Los Angeles. So maybe if they could package one or two of their $20 million a year contracts and try and dump some salary. Well, the Raptors don't have that much salary they dump. So maybe you bring in Fred VanVleet on like a $25 million a year, and you try and get off one of your 15 to $25 million guys, or package two guys, however you want to do the salary dump. But I
mhm,
think that may make sense for the Clippers to get another guard in there. So that's really the only team that I'm thinking that's a contender may be able to pull off a sign and trade without bringing or getting off like a useful asset. So
mhm.
I don't, but I'm with you. I don't see many options for Van Fleet in free agency. And while we're on the Clippers, the other name who may stir up some comments here. Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook is a free agent, and I imagine, in all honesty, it's just going to be a vet minimum for Russell Westbrook. And whether that be from the Clippers or another team, I don't think he's going to get a big contract. What direction do you think Russell Westbrook goes in this offseason?
Ooh, first off, I'm waiting Trey for a comment here and some comment on Westbrook. But before that happens, I think he should stay with the Clippers. And I know he had like a pretty decent playoff run for his caliber of a player. So Trey, don't hate me for that comment. Um, but I mean, bring him back on a vet minimum, like you said. And I think if you keep things rolling and give him a whole season with Kawhi, get a hopefully healthy PG by start of the year and run it back. And I think you don't need to change much with this Clippers roster. I think if you could possibly add a good center in free agency to kind of back up Zubac, and maybe even it might be a kind of a weird fit, but maybe bring in Draymond Green with the Clippers. I know, like, it's not really a big kind of emotional team where he might not fit their kinda mentality. I can see him going to the Grizzlies or the Pistons, but I think if you bring in Westbrook on a vet min and possibly get a good center, like an older center who can lead this team, I think he could do some damage in the West. So, I like Westbrook staying on a vet minimum with the Clippers.
I think that makes sense because I feel like they had a defined role for him that he was able to do. He wasn't asked to do a ton. He was asked to play good defense and rebound from the guard position. He was
Mhm,
able to do that. So I do think that makes sense just from, if he comes in on a vet minimum, probably won't start, but assuming they don't make a big move, which they don't really have a ton of cap flexibility to go out there and make moves. So I'm with you on Russ back to the Clippers, and let's go back to Draymond Green because that's another interesting name in free agency this year. So I think he's going back to the Warriors. Do you agree? If not, I know you threw out some teams already, but what are you looking at for a potential fit for Draymond if he leaves?
I mean, I don't know. I think it might be the end of the era for Draymond and Golden State, but I feel like that they really want to bring him back. And I know Bob Myers is gone, and they've made some interesting moves so far with Chris Paul and sending off Jordan Poole. So it makes you wonder, are they really trying to change their identity as the Warriors and trying to have like cling on to that glimpse of hope of the that once championship roster? And is Dream on the move to really sign him? No, I don't think he is, really. I It may be just a little controversial, but I think I could see him, like I said, going to the Pistons or even the Grizzlies. I think he fits the Grizzlies kind of mentality really well. I'm just worried that all the kind of conflicts with Marcus Smart, with Jaw, and just might kind of conflict together. But if it works out, I think that could be just kind of a good grit and grind team like we saw in Memphis back in the early 2000s. And I mean, who knows? That could kind of revitalize Draymond's career. I'm not saying give him a lot of money at all. Like, do not give him money. But I think a good, just kind of a healthy deal for Draymond would be a perfect fit for wherever he goes.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on this one because I do think the Warriors are the best option for Draymond, and I do think that they should bring him back. And I think the one thing about the Chris Paul and Jordan Poole swap that a lot of people aren't really talking about is that the Warriors, are basically getting 4 years of Jordan Poole for 1 year of Chris Paul.
Mhm,
Obviously, you can bring Chris Paul back next year for 30 million, but his contract is non-guaranteed, so you can cut him and completely be done with him. So I think what is going to happen here, or I think the reason this was made, I should say, is that you can, afford to bring Draymond back, and it's not going to hurt you as much. This year it won't be great in terms of how much money you're spending, but I think next year the trade was very, very interesting. I'm not even sure who I like it for and who I don't like it for because there's some issues on both sides of that. But I think the one thing that does make sense for Golden State is that they're getting off 3 years of Jordan Poole's $30 million contract, and Jordan Poole's contract was abysmal. That's the one thing that a lot of people won't talk about is a lot of people are willing to say Jordan Poole is bad, but they're not willing to go. Well, it makes sense that he didn't have a ton of trade value considering, we're willing to say he's bad, but he's on a 4 year, 30 million a year contract, so no one's going to want that contract if he's bad. But like the original point I was trying to make. He you can afford to give Draymond 2 3 years because you don't have to worry about paying Jordan
mhm,
Poole a couple years down the line. So I do think that brings up some flexibility to bring Draymond back in. And I think from an offensive standpoint, I think Draymond fits what the Warriors want to do, where he can handle the ball a little bit. He can set screens at the top of the key, and they can run some action for him. So I think it makes more sense for him there. But I would be interested to see if he were to go elsewhere. One, how much would he get paid? And two, what would his role look like? Those I kind of hope he leaves because I think those are two kind of interesting things to watch. Kind of how the league values Draymond, and how a team, even if it is the Pistons, Grizzlies, whoever, how they would utilize him. I think is something I'd be really interested in watching. So I hope you're right. I hope you're right because I do think it would be interesting. So.
mhm.
And then watch out for the Kings for Draymond. That is a team that I was gonna bring up another guy that I think may end up in Sacramento here, but the Kings didn't dump Holmes' salary in the draft to do nothing during free agency. Whether they do something right or do something wrong, I think they're going to do something in free agency just with the new cap flexibility that they have. The guy I was going to bring up was Kyle Kuzma. I think Kyle Kuzma may be the move for Sacramento. Do you think it's Draymond? Do you think it's Kuzma? What do you think Sacramento is going to do here? And which free agent do they like to bring in?
I mean, I never thought I would hear Kyle Kuzma in a Kings jersey, but that kinda piqued my interest a little bit. I mean, I don't hate that fit, and they don't have a lot of just kinda forward help with the Kings, I feel like, and outside of Harrison Barnes and Sabonis, who really do you have? And I think kind of even if he comes off the bench, Trey chiming in, if they're letting Barnes go, I'd love to have him. Who are you speaking for, Trey? Celtics?
Probably the Celtics.
Celtics? I would love to have Harrison Barnes at the Celtics. But outside of that, I think Kuzma, he would bring a lot to the Kings roster. And I think they struggled a little bit in getting kind of some momentum out of their forwards outside of Sabonis. I know Barnes was great, but they really didn't have any leverage outside of that. And I think if you bring a scoring Kyle Kuzma who can be a little pretty good on defense at times, and I think that would help the Kings a lot. I don't like Draymond going to the Kings just because kind of that bad blood between Sabonis and Fox and between all of them. I think that might hurt their chemistry a little bit and what they're kind of building in Sacktown right now. But I love that Kuzma pick. I really do. But another guy, I don't want to like get too off track, was I was thinking
Mhm.
of, and I just remembered his name, is Chris Middleton to the Kings. And I know based on reaction, I don't know if that's good or not, James, but I think he would fit perfectly in Sacramento. I think getting another just a shooting wing, like an upgraded Harrison Barnes, if he can stay healthy, I think that'd be a perfect fit for the Kings.
It
So,
it piqued my interest because personally, I had never really even considered Chris Middleton leaving Milwaukee. That's the
mhm,
reason that I, made that reaction because to me, he opted out of the player option, and I was like, he's gonna go back to Milwaukee, and they'll, might not be, I think it was 40 or 45 million the last year that player option was,
mhm,
but I was like, they'll give him, more money over 2 or 3 years because, I'm not sure how much he would get if he, waited another year to hit free agency, but for the Kings, that does make sense because they could use a player like Chris Middleton, like you said, some another good shooter off ball, another guy who can go out there and defend, are kind of some things that would do well for the Kings, and also someone with a lot of playoff experience. That's a
mhm,
veteran you can add to that locker room. Not saying they're void of veterans, but they don't really have a ton of guys that have won at a high level. A lot of that roster is guys who made the playoffs for the first time last year, so. I do like that. I do like that. That's probably I like that. I hadn't even considered that before you brought it up. So I like that pull. So
mhm,
another guy who I'm really interested in a free agency that I'll be watching. Maybe the Kings are players here as well. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think there's been any reports linking this player and the Kings, but Cam Johnson is a guy that I'm looking out for. Part of that is because I think he may end up being a Piston here this offseason, but he is a restricted free agent, so Brooklyn has the right to match. So Cam Johnson's a guy I'm interested in. I don't know if it's Brooklyn, don't know if it's Detroit. I think a team like Sacramento could make sense. I'm not sure how much cap they have off the top of my head, but if they have that cap, I wouldn't hate him in Sacramento either. So, Cam Johnson, where do you think the move is for him? And kind of what's a number that you would go to and be comfortable matching for Cam Johnson? I know personally, I was thinking around that 20-25 million mark would be, kind of where I would, start having some hesitancy to match a restricted free agency offer. So, what are your thoughts on that for Cam Johnson?
Ooh, yeah, like, now that you bring up the Pistons, I kinda like the Pistons move, kinda building that kind of young core in Detroit, and really bringing in a small forward because I know they haven't really brought in really any forwards really outside of Bogdanovich and who you have Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duran, Ivy, Cade Cunningham, and then you bring in Cam Johnson. I think that's a good like play-in team if all those guys can really have a step up in their game. But like you said, I think 20-25 mil is perfect for Johnson. I know he was kind of a little bit of a reach in the draft, but he's turned out to be a very good player. And I always remember that Kobe White clip of Cam going at I think 10 it was, or just in the lottery, but outside of that, I know I had a t thinking of that I can't really think of right now, for Johnson. I think it might have been the Kings,
Mhm.
um, but, oh, it's at the top of my head, and I can't think of it right now.
I'll take over here, and if it pops into your mind, go ahead and send it out. But um, I'd love him in Detroit. That's part of the reason I brought him up because I just want that, wanted that to be thrown out there. Um, I think the Pistons are in a situation where they can afford to overpay a little bit too because they don't have a ton of or they have a lot of cap flexibility this year, and they don't have a ton of future guys signed or extended. So they've got some long term flexibility as well. You've got guys like Bogdanovich is the highest paid guy on the roster. He's making 20 million right now. and his contract expires before you would have to extend Cade. So, um, like Burks is making 10, Bagley's making 12. All those guys expire before you have to extend any of the really young guys. So you could put yourself in a situation where even if you overpay for Cam Johnson, because you're not going to get him on a good deal since he's a restricted free agent, but you can kind of overpay for Cam Johnson a little and still have the cap flexibility a couple years down the road to sign your young guys, extend them, determining, kind of some guys play well, some guys don't. That obviously will play out how it plays out. But also, the one thing we haven't brought up, head coach of the Detroit Pistons, Monty Williams, obviously, did a lot of good work with Cam Johnson down in Phoenix. So that's my one Pistons target that I'm hoping they pull, and I think that could kind of help them because he's a really good 3-and-D guy, and the Pistons really need two things: 3-point shooting and defense. And ideally, you'd like them to be at the 3 position or the wing position. So I'm hoping that Cam Johnson, ends up a Piston at the end of this free agency cycle. The one thing I will say is I tweeted this yesterday as well, but there's a portion of Brooklyn Nets fans that I've seen on Twitter that are like, great, the Pistons can overpay for Cam Johnson and they can send us back Jaden Ivey. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Huh? No
Like,
way.
it's like
No way.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I hope they're jokes. I think some people were being serious. But anyone who believes that Jaden Ivey could be shipped off in a Cam Johnson sign and trade might be an idiot. Probably, actually, not even might be. They are an idiot. So that was an unfortunate thing that I saw on Twitter that made me upset. That happens way too often. I see something on Twitter and it makes me upset. Yesterday it was Ivy signing trades for Cam Johnson, but that's the last point I have on Cam Johnson. I had to throw that out there. I had to get that off my chest because it is quite a
Gloomy
situation there.
time. It's quite the gloomy time in Detroit right now.
That is true.
But I
Go
think I
ahead.
think I remember my team. I don't know if it's the for sure one, but it kind of spoke to me when I saw it. Was the Houston Rockets. I don't know why, but a 3-and-D with Ime Udoka in that roster. I know they don't have a lot of kinda small forwards. Kenyon
Mhm.
Martin and newly drafted Cam Whitmore, he could play the small forward, but I can kinda see him being a backup power forward with Jabari. They struggled a lot with three-point shooting, and I think if you
Mhm.
bring in Johnson, who's kind of a proven young guy, and kinda let him cook a little bit in Houston, I think that'd be a great fit for them, and I think he can play defense. He's gonna be fit well in Udoka's scheme, and I like the Rockets for him, and I think, like you said, I do like the Pistons as well. I think that might be, if not, like, tied with that, fit with the Rockets, but now that now that you keep saying the Pistons, it's kinda getting me riled up a little bit for him to be in a Pistons jersey.
I also like the Rocket fit as well. I won't lie because they drafted and like you said they need 3-point shooting and the guys they drafted, Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore, two really good picks. I have no beef with the picks at all. They probably got best player available both times I
Mhm.
selected, and one of them was Cam Whitmore at 20, who find a more talented guy getting drafted at 20. It's
Yeah.
not an easy task. So I think they hit a home run in the draft, but at the same time, they didn't really address that shooting need. So I think a guy like Cam Whitmore could make, or excuse me, a guy like Cam Johnson could make a lot of sense. Also, they end up having kind of a deep roster there. You've
Mhm.
got Whitmore, Jabari Smith, Tari Easton, who I imagine Ime Udoka is going to absolutely love Tari Easton.
Oh, yeah.
Cam Johnson. All of a sudden, you kind of have Martin, Tate, all of a sudden you kind of have a deep set of wings there in Houston that can really get some work done. And, the one thing about Cam Whitmore is that he kind of needs to develop. He's a little bit raw. You can tell
Mhm.
you look at him and you
Yeah.
go, that's an NBA player, but he's kind of raw. So I think
Mhm.
Cam Johnson taking some of the pressure off him early could really help him in his career. So
Yeah.
I'm with you on that as well. I think so for Cam Johnson, there's a lot of teams with money that would make sense to sign him. So he may be the guy
Mhm.
that gets overpaid this summer, but I like it. I like Cam Johnson.
Yeah.
So
And even before, like, we move on, I think another team that would fit well with Johnson is kind of a team we talked about a lot this stream, actually, is the Sacramento Kings.
Hmm.
And I think, like, kind of fitting with that Chris Middleton vibe, I think a 3 and D type of guy for, Sacktown would be very good for Johnson, but I'd say we can leave it at that and kinda move on to your next guy in free agency, James.
Yeah, yeah. I'll throw out. We can throw out a couple more guys. Maybe we can go quicker with some guys that aren't as big name and kind of uh, get out of here. But because I know the plan wasn't to go too long. But one guy that kind of piques my interest a little bit is Jacob Podol, just because Raptors brought him in with the first round pick. And I don't really know what the goal is here for the Raptors. I don't know if they're winning. I don't know if they're rebuilding. I don't know if they plan on sitting in the middle while they try and rebuild. I'm not sure what the Raptors are going to do, but we have Podol who's hitting free agency. Do you think this is the Raptors, or do you think another team tries and nabs him?
I think it's another team, and two teams that kinda stuck out to me, one that I kinda talked about who needed a center, in their whole kind of scheme of fit is the Clippers, which I think pairing him with Zubac, I know Podol kinda wants to go to a contender. I know the Raptors are far from that, even though they won a few years back, but I think going to the Clippers would be a great fit for him. The other team that I was kinda thinking of is the New York Knicks. And I know that might kinda be a little weird, just kinda Podal going to New York, but I think pairing him next to Mitchell Robinson, having him with Randall and Brunson, I think that'd be a good fit with them. Him being kinda younger a little bit, but still being an effective, center.
Hmm. And I'll tell you what, Trey's got a point here. A lot of people love Masai Ujiri because, he did. I think he was the GM when they won the championship, so he deserves some credit for that. But that Raptors team is not in a great spot right now, not at all, and they're kind of stuck middling. Which, in the NBA, being stuck in the middle is the worst place to be stuck. So,
In any
um,
sport, it's bad, yeah.
yeah, that's true. Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant is a free agent. Obviously, this kind of hinges a little bit on Damian Lillard. If Lillard
Mhm.
comes back, I imagine Grant comes back, but I imagine getting Grant back would also entice Damian Lillard as well. So, Jeremy Grant, do you think he stays in Portland?
I like him staying in Portland. I can't really think of another team where he really goes to. I'll have to look at a list of teams right now, but outside of that, I really can't think of another squad that can really spend that money. I know one team that kinda had just got rid of their 4 is the Atlanta Hawks. So I think maybe bringing Grant would be a smarter idea than Collins, kinda getting some more scoring on the post, because I know Collins was kinda struggled and Clint Capella can't score as much as he used to, but getting that Jeremy Grant type of vibe in Atlanta, I think I would like that.
Hmm. That's an interesting one because I'm not sure what their goal is. I think they will have a very active offseason. I think they may move off some guys like maybe a DeAndre Hunter, maybe a
Mhm.
Bogdanovich. Try and get some of those guys off the books. But they also created a $25 million trade exception in that John Collins trade. So you could do a sign and trade of 25 million for Jeremy Grant. That'd be a easy way to get him in the building as well. Which that may make sense if he agrees to a contract in Portland, and then they decide, Damian Lillard decides he wants to get traded. Now all of a sudden, Jeremy Grant wants out as well, and once again, very solid point. It wasn't very hard for Masai Ujiri to swap DeRozan for Kawhi. That's kind of a no-brainer there. So that is a very good point. And they were dealing with an injured Golden State. So a lot of, a lot of question marks there for Ujiri. Um, all right. Brooke Lopez, another Bucks free agent, older guy. I don't know at all what's going on here. You'd think he'd want to go back to Milwaukee. He's got the role
Mhm.
established. It's a winning team, but also this is probably going to be Brooke Lopez's last chance to get paid from anybody.
Yeah, Ooh, that's I haven't really been thinking about Brook Lopez too much in kind of free agency world. One team that kinda has went all out in the trades and kind of is paying only 4 guys right now pretty much, is the Phoenix Suns. And I think a sign and trade would be best thing possible if you're the Phoenix Suns for this. I think trying to unload on Ain's contract and trying probably sending maybe a first round pick out of it, even though it's gonna be in 2032 or whatever whenever it is. Um, but to Milwaukee for Lopez, I think if you because he wants to win. And I think opening up
Mhm.
that three and spreading out that floor with the Phoenix team is what you need, especially with all the scoring around them and getting a defensive guy, which no one has a bone of defense in that Phoenix Suns organization. No one does. I could probably like be the best
Yeah.
defender on that team. But I mean, still, I would love a Brook Lopez and Phoenix not reunion, but just landing spot.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I'd wonder how interested Milwaukee would be in Aiton. I don't know how much other teams want Aiton. You could
Mhm.
say not at all, but he also signed an offer sheet last year with the Pacers, so the Pacers wanted him last year. Um, and Milwaukee may go, well, we can. It's a nice little change of scenery for Aiton, and Aiton is I don't know Aiton and Lopez's ages off the top of my head, but I do know Aiton is miles younger, obviously. So they
Mhm.
may look to try and get a young guy when you have a guy in if they obviously we've talked about Middleton as well in free agency, but Middleton's older if they bring him back. Drew Holiday, not quite as old, but a little bit older. Um I think he's past 30 at this point. Once again, I don't know how old he is off the top of my head. Lopez a little bit older, so they may go, hey, maybe we just get a guy under contract who's a little bit younger, and that way we don't have to worry as much about some of these guys aging out of their prime. So that I think could also make a little bit of sense for them. Last name I will throw out here, who was a actually there's two guys we need to talk about. First guy, we'll go with the one I had on my mind first. First guy, Bruce Brown. Did a lot of good work in the finals and he is now a free agent, understandably so. Where do you think Bruce Brown goes? Because this is an interesting one to me, where to me it feels like he's trying to get paid, but it also feels like a contender would be the best spot for him. So he's kind of stuck in the middle of does he want money or does he want to win? And I'm sure he's going to be more valuable to a team that wants to win.
Yeah, I mean, fit wise, I gotta say he has to stay in Denver. I want him to stay in Denver, but I think, like you said, a contender is the biggest and best option for him. I think the 76ers kind of speak to me in terms of bringing in a four guy, kind of a better PJ Tucker. I'm not. He's sorry, that's disrespectful to Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown is miles better than PJ Tucker, but I think I could see him going there. Staying in Denver is obviously the best case scenario. I think the Clippers could be a good idea for him and kind of making that push in free agency. They don't have a ton of money, but still. And finally, just the Bucks back up for Giannis and possibly with Giannis playing center and Brook Lopez in the future. That who knows? And I think Brown kind of playing the four, Giannis playing the five could be a good lineup for Milwaukee.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think those are all some strong options. Last guy I'll throw out here today. Um, the most polarizing, possibly, even though we talked about Kyrie Irving, Russell Westbrook. A lot of guys, some teams may love, some teams may hate, but Dylan Brooks, he's not going back to Memphis under any circumstance. Where does Dylan Brooks go?
Sorry, allow me to gather myself real quick while you said Dylan Brooks. Nowhere. Not in the NBA. Not in the NBA.
someone's
But
gonna someone's gonna give him an NBA contract.
yeah, I mean, aside from the jokes, I mean, man, where's this man going? Like, I'm sorry. Who wants him? I think the Knicks would be hilarious, but also a great spot for him. I think if you pair him with Randall, Brunson, and kinda getting a defensive guy, really, because I know the Knicks kinda struggled on defense a little bit last year, and kinda bringing that mentality to New York is kinda I feel like what they need. Because they're a very young team, and I feel like they don't have that dog in them a little bit, and Dylan Brooks definitely brings that dog in him, so I think
Mhm.
New York sticks out to me.
And, Josh Hart's kind of doing a similar thing. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, if you bring in Josh Hart and Dylan Brooks, you have a solid defensive wing combo and two really good glue guys.
Yeah,
So I don't hate that. Also, Knicks, I saw a report that the Knicks were interested in bringing in Dante DiVincenzo, which for any college basketball fan, all of a sudden you've got
love that,
DiVincenzo,
love
Jalen
that.
Brunson, and Josh Hart. And
Mhm.
I'll just say, as a Michigan fan who Dante DiVincenzo has like a spot of my memory, like chunked off from when he absolutely diced us in the national championship game. That's ended up being a long time ago, but that man went off in the national title game and ruined my day a couple years ago. So,
I love that day. Love that day. I had Villanova winning it all, and I couldn't be happier.
oh, that's a lot of fun when the team you pick wins it all. And also, Malcolm Brogdon trade post. Here's the thing about Malcolm Brogdon. I don't think any team wants Malcolm Brogdon. I think
Yeah,
he's literally too injured to get traded.
yeah, Trey, I'm gonna have to do some real thinking on that one because I can't think of a trade at the top of my head, and whoever wants him, it's gonna be a bad team. Like, it's no one's gonna want, like, it's gonna be a young team, it's gonna be a team that's rebuilding. I mean, Charlotte Hornets, like, that's who I can think of right now. I mean, they don't really have a backup point guard with LaMelo. Sorry, Terry Rozier, but still, he's getting old. I think if you bring in him to Charlotte, it would be a good decision. I can see, as painfully as it sounds, Minnesota. I think if they're willing to take on a chance with Brogdon, it could be good. But Trey, showing the oh, I got it.
Oh, all right,
There you
all
go. All right.
right.
Brogdon a first for Buddy Hield. Send it in. I would love that more than anything. Please bring in Buddy. I mean, the Celtics need a 3 and D guy. I know they just got Jordan Walsh, but Buddy Hield, please. Harrison Barnes, like Trey said earlier. I would love that. So
The
I don't
only
see it
problem
happening.
is if you the only yeah, I don't see it happening either. But the only problem is if you trade off Brogdon, now you're sitting with your guards being Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. You got you got to add some depth help badly, or
Let
some
Fast
some
PP
guards help
cook.
badly.
Let Pritchard cook.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. Also,
Jalen Brown can play the
I'm
point. I mean, he's been
who's
dribbling
that?
like a blind man in the playoffs, but if he gets that situated, then who knows?
Who knows? Also, Trey's gonna start lobbying for the Nick Smith Jr. and Brogdon swap for to get to get
No.
Brogdon down in Charlotte. So, all right, we covered NBA free agency, even hit some Malcolm Brogdon. Um, we were sitting at 47 minutes, so I said we wrap it here unless you have any other free agents or any other offseason stuff that is sitting around at the top of your head that you got to throw out there. Otherwise, I say we call it a day for the Daily Show.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good.
All
Um,
right.
like name you said just now, DiVincenzo, Celtics, book it. I would love
Oh,
that.
I love. Also, I'm a big DiVincenzo fan. DiVincenzo could go anywhere, and I'd be like, I like that. I
Yeah,
like that.
I love DiVincenzo.
Um, yeah, he's a good player. Um, Daily Show will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow is Thursday, and well, I don't know who's going to be here, so show up and who knows. It's the treat of the Daily Show. You get caught to a surprise every day with who is the host. So make sure you tune in. Make sure you view the site vendettasportsmedia.com as well. Obviously, NBA free agency tuning up, so there will be a lot of posts on the site for that when free agency goes down. Otherwise, thank you to everyone who tuned into the Daily Show, and thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe and do all that on the YouTube. Peace.